Kebabs can be super confusing because there are so many of them from all over the world. Meat on a stick. Cavemen have been doing this since we learned to pound our chests and domesticate fire. But somewhere between grunting at mammoths and Uber Eats, kebabs became the dominant food item for a vast chunk of the planet. So in this video, we're gonna go through a little journey through time here to track the sprawling global influence of the humble kebab. Because kebabs
finds a way.
If you're confused by what a kebab is, that totally makes sense because there are so many of them from all over the world. Every country seems to have their own version of a kebab. We're gonna talk about how the hell kebabs even became a thing. We're gonna make some, then we're gonna eat some. It's gonna be a grand old time.
My body is ready.
Let's clear one thing away off the top here. Nobody invented the kebab. There was no one guy, there was no one moment. Because cooking meat on a stick over fire is simply one step removed from just holding it over a heat source with your hand, right? It's just almost like common sense if you're a human. Now, Homer wrote about skewering meat and cooking it over fire in the Iliad. The same thing was going on in places like India, in Crete, in North Africa with the Moors. Everybody with access to fire who also killed an animal pretty much arrived at the same conclusion. It's not really genius, it's hunger and humanity. But at some point, the kebab as a named and recognized thing began to crystallize. The word kebab actually comes from some of the oldest languages on the planet, right? Aramaic, Akkadian, Persian, Arabic. It shows up in ancient religious texts and was even mentioned in an old, dusty cookbook from the 10th century from a dude in Baghdad. The word itself has been around longer than most countries. But here's what most people get wrong about the kebab. It does not mean meat on a stick. It actually means roasted meat. That's it. A döner, spinning on a vertical spit. That's a kebab. A barg, flat pieces of meat skewered and kind of grilled over coals in Persia. That's a kebab. Seekh, ground meat put on a skewer from the Indian subcontinent, right? That's also a kebab. I probably mispronounced every single one of those kebabs, but you get the point. The whole skewering thing is really just a technique. The word is more about the fire. So really, if you think about it, anything can be a kebab so long as you cook it over fire. You can get really creative with that. So where does this dish actually come from? So again, we don't really know, but the best evidence points to nomadic and semi-nomadic people traveling around Central Asia. Soldiers and herders on the move with a meat-heavy diet and no permanent kitchen. You kill the animal, you start a fire, and you cook it with whatever stick you can find in the general area, or your sword, anything like that. Speaking of swords, according to legend, Persian and Turkish soldiers were said to have used their actual combat swords in between battles to make these fires in the field and roast meat for, lunch, dinner, whatever, sort of, again, in between battles, which is pretty cool. It's efficient, it's practical, it's badass, very machismo. Now, the practicality of the kebab is exactly what allowed it to spread so easily. Because the kebab didn't just stay in the Central Asian steppes. It moved with the people who made it along trade routes, through conquest, into the courts and kitchens where it would be transformed into something that the nomads who started it would barely recognize today. So the earliest references of the kebab came from the Islamic world centuries before the Ottoman Empire even existed. But it was the Turkic people who would eventually carry the word and the dish across 3 continents, and then later, the globe. So the kebab exists everywhere fire exists, but it's still just meat over a flame. It hasn't been refined yet, but that's about to change. So the kebab started as survival food for nomads and soldiers in the field. But then it hits Persia, aka modern day Iran, and everything changes. Little sidebar here. This video would literally be 17.69 repeating hours long if we were to talk about every single kebab in Earth's culinary canon. So we're gonna kind of touch and talk about some of the more popular, sort of more culture shifting ones. The Persians took the kebab and made it courtly. We're talking royal feasts with yogurt and saffron marinades and techniques passed down through palace kitchens and their chefs. These were people who were entrusted by the wealthy elites to cook their food professionally. It was fancy. Kubide was ground meat pounded on a stone with a wooden mallet until the texture was perfect, almost kind of like somewhere hybrid between a sausage and like a hamburger. Barg was whole cuts of meats, either beef or lamb, usually marinated, sliced super thin, skewered on like coal into these whole big pieces. You know, you kind of trim the edges off. It was a little more precise. This was definitely not just a bunch of dudes camping in the woods like grilling meat. Real cuisine was really kind of starting to take shape. So Persian kebab culture started in the, you know, the castles and the courts, but then it trickled down into the streets. A trickle down that actually works, go figure. The kebab went from something the king ate to something, you know, a regular shoe keeper ate for lunch. And that pattern is going to repeat itself over and over throughout history. But the Persians were not the only people refining the kebab. The Turks had their own kebab traditions long before the Ottoman Empire became sort of like the main power player in that region. When they migrated into Anatolia, aka modern day Turkey, the two traditions kind of like merged together, right? The Ottomans didn't just borrow the kebab, they took it and they fused a couple cultures together to create their own version, and then because they were so popular, it spread all over. Did I say popular? I meant powerful. Popular too, I guess. Depends who you ask, but yeah. The Ottoman Empire lasted for about 600 years and stretched across Europe, Asia, and Africa. And wherever the Ottomans went, the kebab followed. And you know, the Ottoman Empire, it was sprawling. Different regions of the empire started developing their own versions of kebab. Adana, Urfa, Istanbul, many, many more. Each of these places put their own stamp on the dish. The Ottomans also invented the kebab shop, which were these special establishments called, and I'm definitely gonna butcher this, kebabcha. How did I do? Essentially, these spots became gathering points for everybody from peasants to royals to, you know, merchants, everybody. It was like the watering hole, just with meat on a stick, or a skewer, or just on bread. And this marked the point where the kebab went from just food to like city infrastructure that kind of kept the empire fed and working. But the biggest contribution from the Ottoman Empire was the vertical rotisserie. Somebody looked at the horizontal spit and thought, hey, what if we were to just kind of turn this thing upright? And that one little idea created the döner kebab, arguably one of the most popular street foods, late night street foods like on earth. The döner would go on to be the daddy of shawarma, gyros, and yes, even tacos al pastor, which we're gonna talk about in detail later. But yeah, one bright idea from Turkey in some random Turkish kitchen changed street food on 4 continents, like that. Well, not like that, it took a long time, but you get it. So the Ottomans then carried the kebab into the Balkans, across North Africa, and deep into Eastern Europe. Dishes like savapci from Bosnia, mitite from Romania. They look a little different, but these are distinct ancestors from the Ottoman kebab. The kebab didn't just spread, it shape-shifted. Now, the Ottomans were having a great, fantastic, fun time pushing west. But what about the east? Turkish, Persian, and Afghan rulers brought their grilling techniques to India, and it quickly caught on fast. It didn't take long before kebab was starting to be served in the royal courts of the Mughal Empire, and according to medieval travelers, even the commoners were eating it for breakfast with naan. Breakfast. I can't say I haven't been there, my people. Then the Mughal emperors got their hands on it and turned it into something completely different. Seekh kebab, which is basically just like ground meat with a bunch of spices and different aromatics in it, kind of squeezed onto a stick. That was a thing. Shami kebab, minced meat blended with chickpeas and fried into these little patties. And my personal favorite origin story, galuti kebab, which was reportedly invented for a ruler whose teeth were so gnarly that he needed a kebab soft enough to eat without chewing. Just kind of like gumming it down. Crazy thought. The lengths people will go for a simple kebab. India did what they do best, right? They added their own like super aromatic spices, and they made it into something that fits the palate of the people. And the kebab that arrived in India would leave smelling and tasting like a completely different dish. But at the end of the day, the DNA was still there, right? Meat, fire, happens to be on a skewer this time, kebab. And then there's China. The Uyghur people of Western China are a Turkic Muslim community with deep roots in Central Asia. Remember the nomads from the steppes we talked about earlier? Yeah, same family tree. Their version of kebab is called chuan, which are basically just like kind of small pieces of lamb put on a skewer, cumin on the lamb, cumin lamb, a little bit of chili on there too. And starting a few decades ago, Uyghur vendors really began setting up street stalls across the entire country. And chuan exploded into one of the most popular street foods in all of China. I'm talking like you could find it in night markets in Beijing, which is literally thousands of miles from where it originated. The people like it. What's not to love? So the kebab had conquered the East, but its biggest invasion was still coming. Europe. Europa! Now, remember, the kebab had already been in Europe for centuries at this point. For a while there, the Ottomans ruled the Balkans in that little chunk of Europe, and they left their little kebab fingerprints all over the region. But that was conquest. What comes next was moving, fleeing, and starting over. It started in the 1920s with Greek and Armenian refugees fleeing Turkey. A lot of those people brought the doner kebab back to Greece, and over time, it became gyros. And you can see the similarities there between shawarma, gyros, and doner kebab. Doner. And that's not even getting into souvlaki, you know, those little chunks of pork on a skewer. A lot of Greeks will tell you they've been making those since the Bronze Age. Let's fast forward to the 1960s and 70s. Turkish workers started moving to Germany to fill labor shortages. And one of those dudes looked at the traditional meal of doner with the vegetables, the rice, and the bread served on a plate and thought, what if I just wrap this all up into a flatbread so people could eat it on the go? And it was right then, in that very moment, that pivotal moment, that the modern doner kebab was invented. Not in Istanbul, in Berlin. It started simple, right? Meat, onions, maybe a little salad, maybe a little sauce action. But over time it evolved. More vegetables were added, it got saucier, it was faster, it was cheaper, it was bigger. It became the perfect food for workers, for students, for anybody stumbling out of the bar at 2 a.m. who made a couple bad decisions. This would be their first good decision of the night, getting a doner. The doner didn't just fit into European food culture, it sort of fused with it. You know, the kebab has been doing that this whole time. It's been fusing with different cultures. This was no different. And it wasn't just Germany. Turks would eventually immigrate to France as well, where it became the third most popular fast food, only behind pizza and burgers, which is insane. In the UK, it's synonymous with pub culture. It's like, you know, when you go out to the pub, it's just as important to get a doner kebab afterwards. Gotta fill the belly, can't be yarf and bile. And then there's Australia, who really fell in love with the kebab, so much so that they invented their own version, their own dish, the halal snack pack. But here's the most wild part about literally all of this. Binge drinking aside, the doner kebab also became one of the most powerful symbols of immigrant integration in Europe. At demonstrations in Berlin in the 1980s, people were literally chanting, "Without foreigners, no doner kebab." Dude, they were literally like threatening the general population by like not making dank food. That's pretty sick. That's leverage. A dish that started on the Central Asian steppe years ago became a rallying cry for inclusion in modern Europe. So the kebab conquered Europe through immigration, but it wasn't done yet, no. It still had the Americas to deal with. It still had that and one of the most wild plot twists to probably ever exist in food history. We talked all about the doner from Turkey on that vertical rotating spit, right? As that technique spread beyond Turkey, different cultures gave it different names. We kind of touched on it, but the Arabs started calling it shawarma. In Greece, it went by gyros. Same vibe, same concept, just different seasoning, different name. But that matters for what happens next. Starting in the 1800s, Lebanese immigrants brought shawarma to Mexico. It started with lamb on a vertical spit, but just like in India, how they kind of added their own flair to it, Mexico did what Mexico does. The lamb got swapped for pork, achiote, and other local chilies and seasonings got added to the marinade. There was no more bread, but the corn tortillas got added. And then, like a crown jewel, somebody decided to put a pineapple on top of the whole thing as it slowly roasted, because pineapple and pork, they're an elite combo. And the result, you already guessed it, tacos al pastor. Yeah, that's correct. One of the most iconic street foods in Mexico, and dare I say maybe even the entire planet. is a direct descendant of the kebab. To the north of Mexico, up in the United States, the kebab kind of entered through the same door all at once. Lebanese and Syrian immigrants brought the shawarma. Persian families opened up shops that served kubade kebab, Adana kebab, barge kebab, all that stuff. It didn't just come from one place, it came as a family of dishes from across the Middle East and the Mediterranean, and each community sort of planted its own version in American soil. But then there's the version that most of us Americans think when they hear the word kebab. For better or worse, probably worse. I'm kind of a hater though. Big chunks of meat with bell peppers, onions, zucchini, basically any neglected vegetables you could find in the bottom of your fridge, all threaded onto the same skewer and tossed onto a grill that's probably way too hot. The skewers are made of wood, so they burn. It's a whole disaster. The funny thing is, in Turkey, where the modern kebab was pretty much invented, you're really rarely ever gonna see vegetables and meat on the same skewer. You might see like an onion or a tomato to like cap it off or whatever, but for the most part, they're cooked separately because they cook at different times, at different rates. So why would you? We'll talk about it later. I actually have a video all about this too, so you can go check that out if you want. Nonetheless, the kebab shape shifted once again. So the kebab is now everywhere with more names, more forms, and more identities than most other dishes on the planet. Döner, shawarma, gyros, al pastor, seekh, kubade, Adana, the list goes on. Different languages, different spices, different continents. But if you strip it all away, it's really just still humans standing around a fire trying to make their food taste good. That hasn't changed for thousands of years, and I hope it never does. All right, what do we got here? I'm gonna start with, let's start with the OG here. Now, I got some gripes with this. This is just like classic Americano maximalism that is just, there's no finesse and it doesn't work in my opinion. The meat chunks are far too big. They cook at different rates than all these vegetables. Well, I do like charry vegetables, and this doesn't look all that bad, really, honestly. It's just like, when I hear kebab, I would not get excited about this because I'd be thinking about that, but let's take a bite and shut up. And also, like, how am I supposed to get a little bit of each vegetable in one bite, besides like, you know, like Bugs Bunnying it? I mean, I'm really trying not to be a hater here. Like, at the backyard function, I'm going for the burger, dog, or ribs. I mean, you're not gonna find me ever eating one of these things. To me, they're kind of sad. I was never excited about them. This, all right, let's talk about this. This is one of my favorite kebabs, probably ever, called kubade kebab. It's Persian, right? Modern day Iran. This one, we use lamb and beef. We got some wonderful flatbread here. You got the dill rice, a little bit of the saffron infused rice, pickles in the form of onions, which is cool. We also have regular grilled onions, the grilled tomato, the pepper. Oh, and my favorite thing ever, hold on. Toom, baby, garlic sauce. No, I did not make this, clearly. Oh, look at that. My wife is literally scared of me when I eat this. I'm pretty excited. Okay, so I'm gonna take some bled here. Just gonna use my hands. You can judge me, that's fine. I would judge me too. A little bit of bread, a little bit of meat, a little bit of garlic sauce, a lot of garlic sauce. Maybe some pickles on there. I don't know, man. Roll up for the boys. Wow. We might even go wild and crazy here. Check this out. A little hot sauce, dude. This is a very, very, very authentic, classic Persian hot sauce. There is just no world, no universe where that is better than that. But I'm just one guy, of course. Let me know in the comments below which kebab is your favorite. I had a killer time talking kebab with you, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like it, subscribe to the channel if you're new and if you like videos like this. If you're not new here, you probably noticed this is kind of like a new style of video I'm trying, so I'd really like your feedback in the comments below. You know, what do you think? Be honest with me, you're not gonna hurt my feelings. Just trying some fun new things around here, so yeah, all good. The best way to support is over on the Grocery Fund, aka the Patreon. Come say what's up in Discord, cop yourself a shirt on the store, adamwitt.store. I got a bunch of designs I've been working on for you guys. I think you'll dig them. That's all I got for you this time, so until next we meet. How do you say goodbye in Turkish?
Güle güle.
Goule, goule.
Gule, gule.
Goule, goule. Okay. All right. See you guys. Peace.